Now, a discussion on issues important to American Muslims. Pollster James Zogby reviews the results of his survey on how Muslims view religion, the Middle East peace process, and economic sanctions against Iraq. Mr. Zogby also identifies the issue deemed most important in November's presidential election. It's just over an hour.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Ali Abu Zakuk. I'm the Executive Director of the American Muslim Council. I welcome you all here to attend this press conference. And I would start with Dr. John Zogby, the President of Zogby International, who conducted the survey for us. And he will give us highlights of the survey, and then we will introduce the rest of the panelists. Please, John.
Thank you, Ali. Hi, good morning. I hope that you have had time to pick up the handouts that are at the table. That'll be very helpful to you because I'm going to make reference to them. I want to thank the American Muslim Council for the opportunity to work on this project because it fit into a series of projects that we are conducting at Zogby International, known as our culture polls. And so as we have completed this very detailed poll of American Muslims, we have also looked at Jewish Americans, Catholics, Protestants, born-agains, and so we have developed a fairly extensive comparative report that I don't have with me here today, but is available at my office, and you're welcome to call for any of those comparisons that you're interested in. This is an important project as a standalone project, though, and it is for two reasons. Number one, this is an important religious group that's in the process of defining itself. And number two, this is a potentially pivotal group in the upcoming elections. And we will see that by virtue of its numbers and its location, especially its concentrations in several key states, in what could promise to be a very close presidential election, even some U.S. Senate elections, this group can be a group, as it comes of age politically, that comes of age rather quickly, rather importantly, on the fast track. What we find when we look in great detail is that on one hand, American Muslims tilt conservative on several social issues, like abortion, parental rights, the death penalty, the treatment of youthful offenders, gay rights, school vouchers. This is American Muslims as a religious community with traditional values. On the other hand, we find that American Muslims tilt liberal on many issues that involve federal involvement and policy. Universal health insurance, increase in the minimum wage, gun control, a unilateral test ban on nuclear weapons, campaign finance reform. This is American Muslims as an urban ethnic community. And so any attempt to package American Muslims in terms of one party or one ideology would be a grand mistake. There are the unique issues that American Muslims bring to the table, and we will examine some of those. But what I'd like to do is have you follow with me as I highlight some of these findings in some of the tables that we have produced for you. And I'd like to start on the first page with the sample characteristics so that we get some kind of an idea as to who American Muslims are and how they fit in with Americans as a whole. And what we have done here in the first column, where there are numbers, we have the results of the sample characteristics of the Muslim survey. So the total of 502 Muslim voters were polled nationwide. And then what we have done is compared them with two of our values polls, where many of these same issues were tested among American voters as a whole. One that was done in August of '99 and another done in February of 2000. So let's quickly take a look. As we look at the various age groups, we do find that American Muslim voters tend younger and considerably younger, under 30, under 50, than do American voters as a whole. When it comes to education, which is the next series of groups, we find that they tend more towards some college and college graduate than American voters as a whole. In terms of the next group that we have in the Muslim column, there of course could be no comparison with these groups and the all Americans as a whole. What we find is about a quarter are Middle East from Arab countries, another 10% Middle East from non-Arab countries like Iran, for example, Turkey, Afghanistan. About 25% from India, Pakistan, South Asia, and another quarter or so from either Africa or African Americans, mainly African Americans in this instance. I won't belabor all this. If we'll skip a little bit, let's just look at party identification and how they identify themselves. Muslims tending a bit more to identify themselves as Democrats, 46%, as opposed to the 39% among American voters as a whole, and significantly less likely to characterize themselves as Republicans. Only about 1 in 6 identify themselves as Republicans, as opposed to about 1/3 of American voters as a whole. How do they identify themselves ideologically? What you see there, interestingly, I think, given the party differential, is that there's very little difference in terms of how they see themselves as very liberal. If you look across the way, they are about the same as Americans as a whole, or liberal, about the same as Americans as a whole, moderates about the same, conservatives about the same, and very conservative, maybe slightly less so. If we can jump to about the 5th page and look at Table 3, one of the questions that we tend to ask is who they voted for in the previous presidential election. And in our American Values surveys of August '99, February 2000, of all American voters, we see that our sample pretty much reflected the actual vote of the 1996 election. 45% Clinton, 36% Dole, 7% Perot. I might add that if we eliminated undecideds, or those not sure of who they voted for, and just eliminated that group, then that presidential sample among all American voters was almost dead on to what it was in 1996. You'll see that Muslims, though, had a greater tendency to vote for Bill Clinton, much less to have voted for Bob Dole, and less to have voted for Ross Perot. Okay. If you will now move to Table 1, I just want to highlight a few issues. I'm not going to go through all of these. But I pointed out, for example, that they tilted liberal on some issues. Let's just look at the various issues. This is not how they were worded, incidentally. We have the survey wording and a survey instrument that is back in our office, and you're welcome to call and to get that. But as you look down the column and look at overall support, that combines strongly and somewhat support together. You will see that 96% want the federal surplus used for health insurance, in this instance for universal health insurance. 95% want it used to strengthen Social Security and Medicare. 93% favor $1 a year increase over the next 3 years on the minimum wage. 93%, I'm rounding here, want government to impose strict regulations, fines on polluters. Almost 90, about 90% want to allow patients to sue HMOs. 89% favor new gun control laws, which is a considerable switch from American voters as a whole. We can go all the way down the line. Let's take a look, though, at some of the more conservative stands among American Muslims. If you'll pick up around almost halfway school vouchers, 85% say they support school vouchers. 84%, the very next group, favor notifying a parent if a daughter under 18 wants an abortion. 77% favor treating 14 to 16-year-olds as adults if they use a gun. 75% favor the death penalty. So you do have an eclectic group here. Let's move quickly now to Table 2. These are some of the unique issues that American Muslims bring to the table. And if they are to be a pivotal vote in several key states, these are issues that are of much greater concern to American Muslims than to voters as a whole. Should there be a Palestinian state? 89%. That is substantially higher than the 63 or 64% that we now see among American voters as a whole. And incidentally, that 63, 64% that we see among American voters as a whole is a record in terms of my polling. But it's 89% among American Muslims. The current economic sanctions, everybody on the same page and table with me? The current economic sanctions against Iraq should be lifted. 77% say yes, compared to about 10% of the total of American voters. You have a dramatic 180-degree turn there. U.S. society currently demonstrates respect toward the Muslim faith. 66% disagree. Agree. 32%, however, disagree. The United States should not use economic sanctions as part of its foreign policy. 59% agree. But 1 in 3, 34% disagree. The United States currently pursues an even-handed Middle East policy. Only 36% agree, but a majority, 55%, disagree. And what about the Clinton administration's handling of the issue of Kashmir? 31% agree with the handling, 42% disagree, 27% not sure. We have not tested that question among American voters as a whole, but I would have to think that since most Americans cannot name 5 provinces in Canada, that we might have a little difficulty getting a substantial number to have a position on the Clinton administration's position on Kashmir. Now, lastly, Table 4. Here is where we have put out some issues in our American Values Survey versus our American Muslim Council survey and drawn comparisons. About a dozen or so issues. The first is on parental notification. You see 78% of all American voters agree with parental notification. 84% of American Muslims do. About illegal aliens being prohibited from receiving government assistance, 61% of Americans as a whole, 51%, and a closer margin, support to oppose among American Muslims. How about putting a $1,000 limit on financial contributions? 55% of Americans as a whole, 65% of American Muslims. Increase the minimum wage by $1. 52% of all Americans, 93% of American Muslims. Invest a portion of the Social Security The actual wording of that is that money that is currently being withheld for Social Security, that a portion of that be allowed for private investment in a private retirement account. 50% of all Americans agree, 42% disagree, but 85% of American Muslims agree. How about the United States should ban underground testing of nuclear weapons? 45%. The American people, American voters as a whole are tied, but American Muslims, almost 3 out of 4 favor that. And then all the way down the line, you see some interesting differences. Let's look at the very last one. How about passing new gun control laws? The American people as a whole, voters as a whole, about 1 in 3 support passing new gun laws, but 89% of American Muslims. All of which is to suggest that as the candidates for president and the United States Senate and the House of Representatives crisscross their districts, their states, and the nation, vying for votes of the American people, this relatively newly visible group in the American political mix offers an eclectic array of positions on issues, but could be very, very pivotal in determining who wins or loses in the 2000 elections. Thank you. I'll answer questions afterward.
Yes, afterwards.
Okay.
Thank you, John. Now it's my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Sulayman Nyang. Professor Nyang is a professor of political science in Howard University. He's a member of the board of directors of the American Muslim Council and the academic advisor of Muslims in the Public Square, a project that is taken care by the Center for Muslim-Christian Understanding in Georgetown University. Professor Nyang.
Good morning. In response to this poll release, I think we should bring to the attention of the American media and the American public 5 critical points which flow out of these statistics. All the Muslims who are actively involved in the community have their own anecdotal evidence to go by, but it is scientifically significant to have polls that locate statistically the Muslim within the American political universe. The 5 points that are critical at this juncture is that the Muslims are now recognized as an important political factor in American society, both statistically and socially in this society. And of course, being actively involved in American society, the Muslims therefore begin to locate themselves on the American cultural and religious landscape. So here, politicians, journalists, academics, and others who observe very closely the American society will begin to see where the Muslims fit in this whole scheme. I think that's one important point. Muslims are now the new kid on the block. And I think those of us who are covering neighborhoods should begin to look at this kid and try to understand what he is going to do or she is going to do. The second thing that needs to be understood here right now is that we have seen that the Muslims suddenly constitute a new swing vote. This is very important because the nature of the Muslim community, the fact that the Muslim community in America is a subset of the Muslim Ummah, which is over 1 billion worldwide, means to say that American society is going to be affected by the Muslims very much like other religious communities in this country have done in the past, if you are familiar with the history and sociology of religion in this country. The third point that is critical with regard to these whole statistics and the manner in which the Muslims are now being located in the statistical universe of American religious groups is the fact that the Muslims are not only the new kid on the block, a potential swing vote block, but at the same time, the issues that the Muslims are raising are cross-cutting. I mean, American political scientists talk about cross-cutting cleavages. I think now we have another community that is a cross-cutting community, in the sense that you cannot identify the Muslim community as a community that is solely in the Democratic column or in the Republican column, because the issues that matter for Muslims cut across the 2 cleavages. And in this case, this puts the Muslim in a cross-cutting category, and at the same time swing vote, because depending on the alignment of forces and the issues that are on the platforms of the different parties, the way the Muslim vote would very much depend on how they read the two platforms or three platforms if you have more than two political parties. The fourth point, which I think is important here with regard to the Muslim community in light of these statistics, is the fact that if you look at the Muslim community in the United States, you will see that there is a high degree of conservatism on a number of issues that are core to American values and society: the family, the protecting the ordinary man, the guy who is down. So there is a tendency, and this is very much rooted in Islamic teachings, the whole idea, when you look at the statistics, that Muslims overwhelmingly support the idea of minimum wage and taking care of social welfare issues is grounded in Islamic thought, and that is the whole concept of zakat and sadaqah. So if you don't give zakat or sadaqah, you would like to see that the government is able to provide some kind of assistance to people who are needy and poor, and that's very important. So here, Islamic philosophy, Muslim thought is very much becoming part of Muslim calculation in terms of public policy. And the last point I want to make here is that in light of the statistics that we have read and we have heard this morning, political scientists, sociologists, journalists who are going to look at the Muslim community will now begin to make comparison between Muslim percentages with regard to a number of issues and counter percentages from other communities. For example, the number of Muslims that are registered to vote this time around is much higher than in previous years. And this is going to make a big difference, because if you look at the concentration of Muslims around the country, you find that the Muslims are in the big swing states: California, New York, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, Maryland, and some of the other places, Texas. So you have Muslims in those areas, and if the race is very tight, they could definitely determine the outcome by couple of thousands of votes. I will stop here, and I'm sure that you may have questions for our colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Nyang. Now let me introduce you Professor Zahid Bukhari. He is the director of Muslims in the Public Square, the project I told you about in the Center for Muslim and Christian Understanding, and one of our great members.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Ali, Brother Ali Abu Zakuk. About the introduction, the project we are involved with, myself and Professor Nyang, this is Project MAPS, Muslims in American Public Square, and I'm really glad and definitely I'd like to give congratulations to American Muslim Council and Dr. John Zogby because they have started the statistical mapping of American Muslims, and that's very much needed. I like to make only one point at this time about all those statistics. I think I like to appeal to all statistical polling organizations, and we have been trying to contact everybody, all organizations. They should start mentioning Muslim in their main table of religious distribution. When they have the Protestant, Catholic, and Jewish, Muslims are almost equal to, or sometime more or sometime less in different statistical tables around the Jewish population. They are coming in, they are showing in the numbers of their statistical polling. So University of Chicago, the very famous GSS survey, NORC data, they have just decided to start putting Muslims' name in their main category. So, and I think the John Zogby did very pioneer stuff in that, all these efforts. So I really like to appeal all major polling organizations that they should put Muslims also in that map. And whenever they are showing table of especially the religious distribution and then their political attitude, a political behavior, a political opinion, they should put Muslim along with Protestant, Christian, Catholic, and Jewish. And I think that will be the whole public, the American public will be, they will be able to see how this new kid on the block, as Professor Nyang said, how they are behaving and how they are giving their opinion on different issues of very much important to American creed. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr. And now we like to present you Brother Abdurrahman Al-Amoudi, who is the founding executive director of the American Muslim Council and who has conceived this idea and worked for it. He's also the secretary of the board of directors of the American Muslim Council. Abdurrahman?
Thank you, Ali. I'd like to thank John Zogby, Zogby International. This is not the first time that we worked together. We worked in '92, we had a survey and we had others. And AMC takes pride into putting out reliable information about Muslim Americans. And I'm humbled here in front of you to say that AMC started this whole process of bringing Muslims to the public square. And we could not have done it better other than to do it with Zogby International. It wasn't an easy task for them, it wasn't for us, just for the simple fact that Muslims in the last 10, 15 years have been coming around, and although I like the term new kid, we are getting older out there. We're not new. So this is not the first and it won't be the last. But from your presence here in the room, I am very satisfied to say that this was the purpose of the whole survey. Since nobody else, as Dr. Bukhari said, is interested, we made sure that the American public gets the interest on the Muslim community, and we are confident with the results that have been produced here that Muslims are definitely part and parcel of America. We are not an alien community no more. We have not been for hundreds of years, but we have, since we have to do the job, we are doing the job, and we're showing you here what we have done. And this sets it for the Muslims that yes, we are part and parcel of America, cross-cutting on issues and so on and so forth. We are not tilted this way or that way, and most importantly, we are Americans as much as and as good as it gets. My final remark is on the political side. Although the survey shows that Muslims voted overwhelmingly Democratic in '96, that is not because the whole Muslim community is Democratic. Muslim community will vote where its interest in. The Muslim community voted for the Clinton ticket in '96 out of pure politics. The Clinton administration did most for Muslim Americans from all presidents that have been out there, and I can list the whole issue. It will be different in 2000. Muslims will not, and they should not be taken lightly. And yes, Muslims can make the difference in the battlegrounds, whether it is California, Michigan, and the others. And Muslims can, if we organize ourselves a little better, be a swing vote, as John Zogby said. In California, for example, we have more than, if I exaggerate, I would say confidently more than 200,000 Muslim votes. If I don't exaggerate, I would say we have at least 100,000 Muslim votes in California only. If we can mobilize half of that, we are the swinging vote there, I believe. In Michigan, the same. In Illinois and many other places, Muslims will be there and they're out there. So I thank John Zogby and his leadership on this survey. You'll hear more from us on this, and hopefully this will give you some real good, reliable statistics on the Muslim community and Muslims in America. Thank you.
Thank you, Abdurrahman. Now it is open for questions for everybody. Yes.
Yes, Professor, yes. You said that the swing vote, Muslim swing vote, would be the direction it goes will be determined by the party platforms.
Yes.
You've got the party platforms now. You've had them for a couple of weeks. Which party is offering a platform that the Muslim voters would find more attractive?
Well, I think even within the Republican and Democratic Party, you can see that not all their candidates are faithful to all their platforms. Some of them hedge their bets depending on their districts. And I think this is where the Muslims are studying very carefully precinct by precinct, state by state.
Well, have you read the platforms yourself? Can you say which of the party?
No, I haven't read. I'm in the process. I'm in the process of examining the Republican and the Democratic platforms. We are looking at them now, because the people have to be communicating. Some of us go around the country talking to different Muslim groups. So we have to study them very carefully, and we talk to local leaders, because they know their terrain better than we do, those of us who are at the national level. But the process has started.
What reaction are you getting so far?
Well, I mean, like you have in some areas, like for example in New York, you have some people who are very strongly leaning towards Hillary Clinton among some of the Muslims. But there are some others who are thinking about Bush. So we'll see what happens.
Yes.
My name is Geoffrey Phillips. I work for the BBC World Service. I'd like to ask John Zogby for clarification of the first two paragraphs in the press statement. The Muslims are reported as saying that up to a third regard attitudes towards Muslim countries as being very important in the way they determine their vote. Mm-hmm. And it strikes me that that's not a very high proportion for people who claim to be voting as Muslims. And I wonder to what extent Muslims in America regard themselves as a political or an electoral constituency. And I contrast that with the very high rate of interest among the people you asked in Islamic issues in the second paragraph, where these things clearly are very important to them. Mm-hmm. And I go on, therefore, to challenge your notion that Muslims as a bloc represent a swing factor in the elections.
Okay, that's a good question, and let me just put it into some kind of context. When there is a response that says that an issue is very important, that relates to a high degree of intensity. What it means is that 1 out of 3 say that this is the very important or the most important consideration. But remember, all of us, whether we're Muslims or not, we have so many variables in our lives that help determine ultimately how we vote and how we behave politically. And so within that broad context, I mean, there's a number of things that come to mind. Articles of the Muslim faith, for example, that is something that has a very high intensity level among all Muslims. But attitudes towards Muslim nations, remember, you have about 25% of the sample that are African Americans and have no direct relationship necessarily to a Muslim nation, or that a substantial portion of American Muslims are not immigrant and therefore have assimilated into American life and like Irish or Italian or other kinds of groups, they do not necessarily then have a high direct proportional relationship or high degree of intensity towards a foreign nation. And so it is very possible then for there to be this kind of differential. In fact, frankly, the fact that 1 out of 3 say that American policy or attitudes towards Muslim nations is something that is very important to them, I think is probably relatively high and much higher than you would find among most other ethnic or religious groups in the United States.
Just one point of clarification. When you say very important, do you mean determining in their attitude towards the vote?
Yes, yeah, okay. As a determinant. Mm-hmm.
Abdurrahman would like to comment? Yes.
Well, my comment is to the gentleman. In our in-house surveys of the Muslim community and registered voters, 2/3 of Muslims are undecided. And I have to tell you, and I hope I'll be backed on this one, Muslims in the United States of America will not vote on foreign issues or on foreign platforms. Foreign platforms of the two parties are not that desirable to the Muslim community. The American Muslim Council is trying to take leadership, and we're succeeding there, to focus the Muslim community on American issues here. But if it comes into the Democratic or Republican platform, when it comes to international issues, Middle East issues, Bosnia, and all of that, Muslims are not happy with any of the two platforms, for your information.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Larry with the Washington Times. From the survey, it seems that the ideal for an American Muslim is to have a large state welfare system, but also have the state protect traditional values, parental choice, morality. In the way the parties go recently, neither one offers both. You tend to have to pick one or the other. And Muslims have voted mostly Democratic, so should we infer that they have voted, therefore, mostly for economic benefits and civil rights over, private morality issues, traditional values issues?
Sulayman?
Well, some of us study these problems, and what I can say to you really is, this is the million-dollar question, really, within the Muslim community itself. And this is where, over time, we will know whether the Muslim community is a voting bloc or not. And I think, as Abdurrahman pointed out, the Muslim leadership in the American Muslim Council especially is now focusing its membership and the larger community on American issues. So in this regard, the question that you raised becomes very relevant. If you look at the pattern of voting over the last, say, 2-3 elections, when Muslims are very visible, since the Reagan period, the last days of Reagan-Bush, to the present time, you will see that there has been this movement towards the Democratic Party. But I think the reason why Muslims voted overwhelmingly for Clinton was because of certain benefits. And of course, Abdurrahman didn't give you the list, the laundry list of Clintonian achievements for Muslims. But I think Clinton set a precedent in terms of organizing, through his wife, the forced Eid celebration at the White House, which symbolically is significant for Muslims. Now, these are some of the things which attracted some of the Muslims to the Clintons. I gave you the example of New York, that some Muslims, based on preliminary, these are not statistical, but just anecdotal data in the New York situation, you see that there is this tendency for Muslims to think of splitting, voting for Bush, but keeping Hillary as senator. So you have that kind of feeling because of what they did for the Muslims during the 8-year term, even though the Muslims, as someone said, are not very happy with either political parties with regard to foreign issues.
Yes.
Yes. Manti Bray, President of the Coordinating Council of Muslim Organizations. Certainly, I'd like to commend the American Muslim Council and Dr. Zogby for this valuable service that you provided the American public. Now that you have the issues out, I'd like to know, are there any efforts to prepare for the Muslim population, maybe a report card on the candidates in terms of how they vote on these certain issues that you've already identified? And also, I'd like to know where you are in terms of actual the efforts for voter registration for the 2000 elections.
Yes, I will take this opportunity to answer you. We are doing, since September last year, a campaign for voter registration with all other Muslim organizations and the Arab American organizations. This is the first time we consolidated our efforts together, and the campaign is still going on. As for the scorecard, and also we are preparing a voter guide for our community to show where the two presidential candidates or all the presidential candidates stand vis-a-vis our issues. And we have, as Abdurrahman said, have shown the 10 most important issues for our community. 2 out of 10 are Jerusalem and lifting sanctions. The other 8 are all domestic American issues. And we will bring that for our community as a guide. We will not endorse any side, but we will educate our community so that, as we did in 1996, published a booklet, we called it Choose or Lose. That means they have to make the decision on information available to them.
Yes. This question is for Mr. Zogby. Could you discuss the Muslim population in battleground states, and also what steps, if any, the candidates can take to harness what you described as a swing vote?
Sure. Okay. I'm not an expert on population. You know, the difficulty is that the U.S. Census is prohibited from asking religious questions on the on their form. But I can tell you where the concentrations certainly are. A very high concentration in the metropolitan New York City area. That includes, of course, the 5 boroughs of New York City, as well as northern New Jersey, where there is a tremendous growing number of Muslims. Jersey City, Hoboken, that area. That's number one, not in population, but just number one. Number two in the city of Philadelphia, less so in Pittsburgh, but therefore the state of Pennsylvania. This is a state now where the presidential election is too close to call. Ohio, the city of Cleveland, most notably. Michigan, of course, another close state. The Detroit-Dearborn area has a substantial number of Arab Muslims, but perhaps even more African-American Muslims. Illinois, notably the city of Chicago there. California, of course. Both the Bay Area and Southern California have dramatic numbers of Arab Muslims, but also Iranian, Turkish, South Asian, and of course African American. Texas, Dallas, Houston are what come to mind. Am I missing anything? Northern Virginia, this area, sure. To be sure, this area has been written about extensively in terms of the growing number. Falls Church, Fairfax County, you know, really huge numbers, as well as on the other side, the city of Baltimore, you know, covering Maryland. What can the parties do? You know, I'll put my other hat on. I'm a former candidate for office. Statute of limitations has run out. It's been 19 years now, so I can talk about that. Nothing works better than physical presence. Actually coming to a constituency and meeting with them and answering questions, hearing things you've never heard before. First and foremost, what that spells is respect for a constituency. And when you bring respect and recognition to a constituency, it can heal wounds if there were any wounds, but more importantly, it builds a bridge. You know, from there, you know, a recognition and understanding of issues that are brought to the table. For example, here is a group that will bring the issue of Jerusalem to the table, as Abdurrahman pointed out. That will also bring, you know, the issue of a number of urban concerns. You know, this in itself is kind of a forgotten issue in this presidential race. You know, the plight of people in cities who are not doing as well under this economic boom as might be expected, and somehow kind of lost in the shuffle. We don't hear much about cities. Here is a group that can revive interest in cities and in urban needs. But, I mean, first and foremost is the fact here are American Muslims now reaching out, here in a very public way, but in communities throughout the country. There are built-in institutions here. I mean, I remember the days when I worked for the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee in the early 1980s. There were 3 or 4 mosques in Brooklyn. How many mosques are there?
About 200 in New York area.
There are about 200 mosques in the New York area right now. These are religious constituencies. These are meeting houses. These are places where people can come and meet with candidates and share their community's needs.
To give you a very specific example, the Senate race in New Jersey in '96 between Torricelli and Zimmer. That was a clear swing vote. You can call Torricelli's office and he can tell you more about that in New Jersey. But I have listed here 9 states, and I'm missing one: New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, California, Texas, Indiana, Illinois, and Virginia. So yes, we are swing votes if we can bring out our community. Here, yes, I'll go back to the new kid in the block. The Muslim community is still struggling with itself on these issues. On the one hand, you have an immigrant community who is not satisfied with the foreign issue platforms. So we are very much struggling with ourselves on that. On the other hand, you have a community who is mainly indigenous Americans who are not satisfied even with the platforms here. So it's a community that we are struggling, and we're helping this community to come to terms with these issues. To answer Mahdi, you know, October 1st, there will be a town meeting here in Washington to rally the whole Muslim community to bring all the candidates within the area, in the tri-state area. And hopefully the American Muslim Council will do the same all over the country. On the issue of where do we stand, Muslims are known to be, by and large, to be conservatives. But we have a soft heart for social issues. And I think this is the pride not only of Muslim Americans, but of all moderate Americans, who on the one hand, they want responsible government, they want small government, they want conservative government, but on the other hand, most Americans, like most Muslims, want social issues. On the issue of the candidates, we sent letters to both vice president candidates to come to terms with the Muslim community and talk to us. So we are trying, and frankly, the timing of releasing the poll today is to start with the campaigns that will start before or after Labor Day weekend, and we have conferences and conventions for the Muslim community. The Muslim community, the difference will be that the Muslim community will be out there voting in numbers. We will be there out, definitely, there is no doubt. And we'll try to bring our best on November 7th. And this is what the American Muslim Council is doing, and the other Muslim organizations. We're all working together in the term that Ali just mentioned. Either we choose or we lose in this election year.
Yes.
Thank you.
Howard Mendelson, I'm in the Journal of Counterterrorism. For Mr. Al-Moody, how long before you think the AMC will be able to raise the issues of foreign policy and have some influence there? And what would be included and what would be raised?
Well, the American Muslim Council will take the leadership into raising their issues behind closed doors. We don't think raising their issues are to the benefit of the Muslim community in America. They are so important, so burning. He told you in our surveys, Jerusalem and the sanctions. And the American Muslim Council, to the testament of many, will show that we are there. What we disagree with others is we don't want those issues to be discussed in the public square. It is better for the Muslim community and for the candidates. But we are there to ask the Muslim community to discuss American issues. We still have a complexity of showing that we are Americans and we care on issues. But when it comes for foreign issues, and both groups, we met with both groups, they know where we stand there, we have problems with them, but we want to guarantee the Muslim community that through dialogue and talking, it will be better. And if we take it to the public square, it won't be in the best interest of the Muslim community or the candidates.
Yes.
Thank you for the panel, for all the information we have today.
Introduce yourself, please.
Nasser Husseini, Voice of America, Radio. In a couple of words, beyond the figures, how would you profile, give us a picture in a couple of sentences about this Muslim community? Is it a still struggling community? Is it just a well-assimilated, integrated community? Is it a community that really reached its aspirations? Please, it's a question for all the panel. Thank you.
Okay, I'm the non-Muslim here.
You can answer first.
All of what you say, and that's in less than a sentence. The American Muslim community is a mosaic. People from different nations, people who have been here over 3 centuries, people who are extremely successful in the professions and in the academic world as well as in business. By the same token, the invisible poor in the inner cities of America. It is a growing community, a community that's growing in visibility. There is a subtle change that's happening here from our language. For those of us who are accustomed to hearing about Christian-Jewish dialogue, we are now hearing Christian-Jewish-Muslim dialogue. From that most subtle to the schools, where now Hillel needs are being brought up, very subtly, very quietly in school cafeterias and university cafeterias throughout the country. And so it's truly an eclectic group in terms of who it is and where it stands.
Yeah.
Yes, Sulayman?
Yeah, again, what I would say is that the Muslim community really, as John said, is a mosaic. The metaphor I always use really is that if you look at the Muslim community, it's a quilt that has patches from various parts of the Muslim world, and it also has native-born Americans, whether they are African Americans, European Americans, or Hispanics, or native people here. Now, from the taxi driver that drives you to Dulles Airport to the scientists at NASA, you have Muslims in almost every walk of American life. You have Muslim millionaires on the one hand, but you have Muslims who are very poor among the underclasses of America. So the Muslim community is America with its diversity. So I think that's the best way to characterize it.
Okay. Zahid, you want to say something?
As another aspect also, I think gentleman asked about, I think the Muslim community is catching up very fast. That's the important what we observe, and not only we, I think when we met the media people, they are also saying that. Because for last 200 years, this only like Christian, Jewish, and all those just the synagogue and churches. But now I think last 10, 20 years, and maybe next 5 to 10 years, the whole thing will be changed just to Christian, Jewish, and Muslims, churches, synagogue, and mosque. So that's the Muslims are catching up so fast. That's the important thing. Whatever the transition or all other factors are there, but that's the fact that they are catching up very fast to be treated as equal with the other religious, ethno-religious community.
Yes. Will the American Muslim Council make an endorsement in the presidential race?
No, we will not be endorsing any side because we are a non-profit organization.
But we have an organization that will do and usually does endorsements at the last week of October. Muslims for Better America.
MBA.
It comes MBA.
Muslims for what?
Muslims for Better America. It always comes with this endorsements, and it's an organization that we work closely.
A political action committee.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
yes, Delinda?
By the end of October.
Delinda Hanley from the Washington Report. If a candidate thumbed his nose at his party's platform and said he would be in favor of an even-handed Middle East policy in Jerusalem and Iraq sanctions lifted, would that be enough to get a bloc vote, a Muslim bloc vote?
Could you say that again?
Okay.
Sorry.
If a candidate thumbed his nose at his party's platform, because the party platforms aren't very good internationally for Muslims now, would that be enough to get a bloc vote together?
I think so. The question is that we have people like Tom Campbell, who is a Republican, or David Bonnier, who is a Democrat. And both of them, they show the side of really responding to issues of American concern, Muslim concern. So this is up to the community in their constituency to really choose the one who responds better to their issues.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, we emphasized issues here for obvious reasons, but we will do a poll later, sometime in October, on the horse race, which will, ultimately determine which way Muslims will go.
Yeah. Yes. Did I see a hand there?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
That was my question. Why didn't you ask preference at this point? When in October do you intend to do that?
We haven't really haven't determined that yet, but early enough so that it gets seen, late enough so that it makes a difference.
That's
Sooner rather than later, A
follow-up?
Do you have any kind of a number on how many American Muslims there are?
According to the statistical report that was published in 1998 by two professors, Professor Ma'in Siddiqui of Colorado State University and Professor Ilyas Bayounis of New York University, this report shows that American Muslims this year will come to about 6.7 million, and they have a statistical approach. They did, studies in New York and in Chicago, in San Diego, and other areas, but that is the best report available in the market.
And what proportion of voters are eligible to vote?
About 20%.
Does anybody out there know what proportion of eligible voters actually do vote? What the turnout tends to be?
Oh, it's high within the Muslim community. It's high, especially on election years. It's very high. I would say 70 to 80% of Muslims vote.
Yes.
There was a report in the LA Times a few months back that quoted a Fareed Newman who said that he was pressured by the AMC to up his numbers. He came to about 5 million. And the AMC, the report said by the LA Times, wanted him to put 6 million. So he's basically, he says he was excommunicated from research.
I don't think Fareed Nu'man said that, and Fareed Nu'man's numbers were in 93. We are 7 years beyond that, and if Fareed Nu'man said 5, then today we should be 8 maybe or more.
Yes.
At a recent AMC conference, there was word of a census to be done along with the American Jewish, one of their councils that was going to do a 2000 census. And at that meeting, it was said quite openly, we don't really know the number of Muslims, so we want to do a parallel census with the Jewish community, who's very good at this. What happened to that census? And that was, at that time, it was held up as sort of the final best accurate numbers we could get on Muslims in the U.S.
This was in this convention?
2 or 3 years ago at an AMC annual event, yes.
Well, we know that there are some Jewish groups that do their own census parallel to the U.S. census, but we couldn't get into real good communication with them to do that. Hopefully we'll do it in 2010, I hope.
And also, this year, the Senate passed a resolution, SR 133. They did recognize in their figures about American Muslim community with around 6 million. That is from the Congress, so that could be some kind of a moderate figure. Yes? Yeah.
What kind of impact do you think that the selection of Joe Lieberman will have within the Muslim community? A lot of his positions are contrary to the positions that are outlined here that members of the Muslim community feel are important.
I was going to say that the Senate resolution that Ali just mentioned, Lieberman is a pioneer and a co-sponsor of that. By and large, in the Muslim community, most Muslims did not have the reaction that you got in the media, that Muslims are alarmed by Lieberman and so on. In the American Muslim Council, we have a good relationship with Lieberman since 1993. We worked with him on 2 issues. We had problems for 2 years during the Steve Emerson hoopla that he had, but after that, we even gave Lieberman more than an award. He always attends our conventions. We meet with him. The most important thing for Lieberman is when I was told that Lieberman was chosen as the VP candidate, I said, good, so in 2030 we'll have a Muslim candidate to be a VP, which opens the door for all of us. This doesn't mean that we don't have issues that we will struggle with Lieberman and others. And by the way, yesterday our president met with Lieberman in Michigan and handed him a letter, as I said, that we want to meet with him. If we meet with Lieberman, it will be in the best interest of the Democratic Party more than us. There is no doubt about it. But we want, not like other groups want, a town meeting with Lieberman. We know how to deal with these issues. We meet with him in a leadership meeting, and we'll come to a consensus of some issues. The most important issue, Lieberman, is he's a man of ethics, a man of religion, a minority, somebody that we can see eye to eye and face and talk with him. And now that I see my friend Jim Zogby out there, Lieberman helped us in many issues, whether it is as Arab Americans or Muslim Americans. And I think for him, if the Democrats will have the White House, will have a good relationship, a good working relationship with Lieberman, I believe.
Yes.
Ahmadine Ahmed, the Minaret of Freedom Institute. It is often said by commentators that Jerusalem is not a core issue for Muslim Americans the way it is for many Jewish Americans. Would you agree or disagree with this?
No, I disagree because in many of our surveys, it came number 2 after education, which put it in the heart of many Muslims. In Dr. Zogby's survey, it shows more than 94% of them who care for it. So the issue for us is really, the issue of Jerusalem is very close to the hearts of American Muslims.
Yeah, let's close it.
Okay, well, the last one.
Yeah. Hassan Azar from Turkey Daily. You said especially 10 issues are very important for American Muslim community. I'm going to ask, which one is going to be the most important issue and dominant factor in this election?
The most important issue that we would try to have for Muslims is the issue of inclusion for Muslims on across all boards of political, you name it, all. This is where the Muslim community will have its leadership within the Muslim community. We want what Lieberman got. We want the door to be opened for us as a community, a hard-working community, a respected community, a community that has all kinds of good ratings with all kinds of government organizations. And I hope the media will help us with that. If the doors have been opened for Lieberman out of good hard work, we want the same doors opened for us as Muslims.
The last one, Tabit.
Yes, please.
Recognize yourself.
I appreciate, my name is Thabit Al-Bardisi, Middle East Broadcasting Center. I appreciate everything here, and I would like to ask a question. It's very great and very nice to have all that inclusion, but you seem to be in a self-congratulatory mode when you say that we have been included more than any other organization under Clinton. But the fact is that inclusion has been in the form of celebrations of Eid in the White House, but never in the form of appointments in the State Department or the Defense Department. Could you explain that?
Thabit, you have been here for many years. Those issues that you mentioned are very important. These are milestones that the Muslims have to go through. Yes, we only have one Muslim ambassador. Yes, we only have the most important house.
The highest executive.
Highest executive is a deputy of the Agriculture Department or assistant there. But yes, we have also people who are playing very pivotal role. We have Huma Abdin, who is with Hillary Clinton and really is a pivotal with Hillary Clinton. We have Muna Abd, I think her name is, who is in the Gore campaign. We have people who are coming up in the issue of journalism, in the departments, the Justice Department, the Economic Department, and all of the other departments. We have people coming up there. The best for Muslims is we have a lot of our young Muslims, and I hope we can have a survey of government. Now we have many Muslims who are climbing through the ranks in all forms of government, including the FBI, including the Secret Service, including all of them. And this is what the fruit will show. That's why I said in 2030, we will have a Muslim VP candidate. So Muslims, we are not only, we have and we deserve to congratulate ourselves because in the last 10 years, the Muslim community leaped high miles. And for me, Professor Nyang is the authority on Islam in America. He needs to comment on this one, but I think we are going on a steady level and you'll see more from us.
Yeah, I think really, in response to your question, what has to be said, you have to look at the Muslim community in comparative terms. If you look at Muslims in America, they have been here. Of course, they have a longer history, but they were not visible. Now, since World War II, Muslims have become more and more visible. Now, if you look at the history of all groups, whether you're talking about Catholics, Jews, and other minorities, blacks and others that came through, you look at their history in terms of political involvement and engagement in America, you have symbolic and substantive gains. The Muslims are just beginning to take the significant step forward. And I think there may be few Muslim appointments, but I think the politicians, they're very smart. They're not, they read their terrain very carefully. And American politicians recognize, since the days of Woodrow Wilson, when he appointed Brandeis, and then, of course, you have FDR, many of the ethnic Americans were gradually appointed. The same thing is going to happen with Muslims, because as Muslims become more and more appreciated as fellow Americans, and they demonstrate their individual qualities, and you have many Muslims of quality and intelligence in this country, they will begin to occupy positions of responsibility. This happens with other communities, so will it happen to the Muslims.
Thank you, Professor Nyang, and thank you all. This will conclude the press conference, and we appreciate your presence.
Good. Thank you very much. Really fantastic.